Hi everybody, Matt and Paul here from Fiduciary Wealth in Gibraltar with another video for you today where we will be specifically talking about becoming self-employed in Gibraltar and using this as a route to residency in Gibraltar. Um, so yeah, here we go. Self-employed in Paul, self-employed in Gibraltar, Paul.
Okay. Um, yeah, I think, Matt, it would be good if you could clarify for the viewers how that works because it's gone through different changes over a short period of time. They've tightened. Um, Everyone's found ways around the new rules. They've tightened again, and we've found ways of going around it. And then finally, they've tightened it so much that there's hardly any leeway when it comes to self-employed. So if you would be so kind as to run through what the latest um, position is from the government of Gibraltar and the department that deals with residency applications with respect to self-employed, because as you know, in the past it was quite common for people to relocate into Gibraltar to have a services contract with their own firm and they were providing services. And I think that has changed quite dramatically. So if you can just go through the various changes and where we stand now, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Paul. There's been a lot of changes. So if we kind of go back in time slightly, um, where 4 or 5 years ago, there was maybe a little bit longer. One of the routes to residency was what they called self-sufficiency. So it's quite an easy route to Gibraltar. You just needed to demonstrate that you had funds to live off. You wouldn't be a burden on Gibraltar, and this could have been via savings, investments, work from another country, and they would waive the application through. And from our experience during then, they were encouraging applications. It was very easy to apply. Then Brexit happened and COVID happened, and both those events drove more people to come to Gibraltar. Brexit meant it was harder to get in the EU, whereas Brits could get into Gibraltar a lot easier. And then COVID, a lot of people realized they could work remotely. This happened a lot in the UK, especially. I think I read recently that the UK has the highest working from home statistics anywhere in the world. So obviously people had that access and they decided, okay, do I want to work from, my home in the UK, or shall I work close to the beach in Gibraltar, still from the UK firm? And that was a route. So they closed self-sufficiency, and naturally, a lot of people moved to self-employed. And initially, the government didn't really kind of catch up with this, and a lot of applications went through. To use examples, we had an individual, he had 4 or 5 properties in the UK. We listed him as a self-employed landlord, which technically it was. They approved it. There were maybe some people who had their work from the UK. They resigned from that job. They became an external contractor, self-employed as a contractor, but effectively they were working for this one company. That worked. The landlord worked. There is zero chance that would get approved now under the new regime. Now, when we view the applications, they are scrutinizing a lot of detail. And effectively, when the government before were looking for reasons to approve an application, now we see them looking for reasons to decline an application. So we do process a lot of the applications. We understand what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. I think number one, which is very important, which is quite obvious, Gibraltar wants people coming in here who are going to be generating taxable income in Gibraltar. So if you were to hear to say, I'm going to be self-employed um, as something that you have zero experience in, that you've never done before, that it's going to be difficult for you to demonstrate that you can generate taxable income from this. So effectively, their main communication is that you have to be legitimately self-employed. So means you're working from Gibraltar. You will need an office in Gibraltar in pretty much all cases. Now, this can be a shared office space, but it has to be a full-time office. And you need to have multiple clients. It can't be you working remotely from a UK or even a European based business as an external contractor, even if you're self employed here. You've got to be legitimately self employed, someone who can establish themselves in Gibraltar and generate the work from Gibraltar. Again, if I don't know, to use an example, you own a very successful plumbing firm in the UK, you're generating a lot of, and then you say, okay, I'm no longer kind of hands on. I can manage that from Gibraltar. Um, they may struggle with that application because all the work is going in the UK. So although you're kind of self-employed, in reality, that's a UK business. You're in Gibraltar. So there's little kind of nuances with it. I think if you are legitimately self-employed, it's a case of you have to be able to demonstrate to the civil registration and the government here how that's going to operate and how you're going to bring in the taxable income. And really and truly, that's how we come into the equation. I would say when it comes to residency applications in general, these have become a lot more difficult to get through in Gibraltar for obvious reasons. And when it comes to the self-employed applications, even more so because there's those more steps to go through that we have to fight through each step to do it. But that sounds very negative. On the positive side, it is possible to establish yourself self-employed here in Gibraltar, work and live in Gibraltar. We've been able to establish a lot of people self-employed here to work and live in Gibraltar. And if that is your dream to do so, then reach out to us and we can look at that for you.
I think the bottom line, Matt, my understanding is that there has to be substance and roots. In other words, what they want to do is if you're coming over and you want to come under self-employed via the self-employed route, then you have to create a Gibraltar company and drive economic growth and employment, as opposed to I'm just providing services to a UK company,
Exactly.
which they would allow
Exactly.
before. They want to see, okay, it's a Gibraltar company. It will drive not just income tax, but potentially corporate tax, and it will create employment. So in other countries, they have investor startup visas where you have to employ X number of people and the company has to has certain level of turnover. They're not imposing those harsh restrictions, but they want to make sure, no, self-employed, fine, substance and roots. Demonstrate that this is a legitimate company trading from Gibraltar, based in Gibraltar, creating revenue, both income, personal tax and corporate tax in Gibraltar, and potentially hiring people. And I
Ex-
think the bar they keep adjusting until they are confident that they've squeezed the life out of anyone trying to circumvent the rules.
Exactly. And I think one thing everyone needs to take into account as well is that when you first arrive in Gibraltar, like most countries, when you obtain residency, it's temporary residency first, and your residency needs to be renewed, usually after the first year, then after 2 years. So when it comes to the renewal process, it is a lot lighter than the original residency process, but they have that opportunity to assess, okay, this person, are they generating taxable income? And the fact is, and we don't know how they would react in this situation, but if somebody comes here self-employed, they come to renew their residency a year, and the government can see there's been no income tax paid from that company or from that individual, then that clearly doesn't kind of meet the criteria of self-employed there. So that's something to kind of bear in mind as well.
No, I would agree with you. I mean, this is a question of evaluating, yes, someone is here, they claim to be self-employed, and then they get paid minimal income, pay minimal income tax. But they have access to all the public services, right? I
Exactly.
mean, no jurisdiction in their right mind would allow such a gaping hole where people come over are not really contributing through taxation, but are availing themselves of all the services for free. You know, it just doesn't work. So
Yeah.
it's not just, uh, you can't fudge this. You can't try to, because you're right, they will look at tax returns. I think all the government departments are more interconnected, and they will look at returns that have been filed, and then they can, I guess that they can, when it comes to renewing, they can say, you know what, no thanks. I think government should probably issue clearer guidelines in respect, when you're self-employed, what is the minimal income expectation? That could
Exactly.
add considerable value. Yeah.
Yeah.
Individuals know where they stand. You can't, try and find a loophole. They have to pay tax, and it will have to be a certain amount, and then they can take advantage of all the services that Gibraltar provides. So it has to be a win-win. But
Yeah.
no, government hasn't really issued any guidelines that can help practitioners to steer uh, applicants in a particular direction.
Yeah. Completely agree with that one, Paul. And that's a question we get quite often is what is the minimum? And okay, there isn't a minimum. And that would be really helpful. But yeah, there was another term, and I was trying to think of a more technical term, but I'm not sure if there is one. But the fact is, yeah, you can't fudge it. And maybe 5 years ago, a few could have, not now. It has to be legitimate, and you have to meet all the criteria we've covered in the video. So if you are thinking of a route to residency, and part of the reason we're doing this video is we do get inquiries like this, and of course we understand people have this desire to move to Gibraltar, and we understand that completely. But like any country, there are rules to entry, and if you want to come and self-employed, you have to tick all those boxes. So if you do, and maybe you're watching this video because you are self-employed, and you love the idea of coming to Gibraltar and you're at the start of that journey, then feel free to reach out to Paul and I, and I'm sure we can guide you through that process. Otherwise, thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, subscribe, leave any comments or any ideas you want for future videos, and we'll be back to you with another video very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Matt.